if you're caloric neutral, you'll strip off body fat and put muscle on without having to go in a caloric deficit. Anybody who follows the program and actually eats and isn't afraid of eating will grow muscle on it.
And then when you go through it, you're like, oh, time under tension. You're not letting those bells go the whole time from there. It's like, so by the time you get to that last round of squats, it's like everything in your body is turned on at that time.
And in order to be mentally tough, you have to know why you're going to be mentally tough. Most people won't take the time to find their why.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. So today I get to sit down with my very special guest, Geoff Neupert, Master Strength Coach of the World. I first knew of Geoff for a long time as the Kettlebell Complex guy. He's a former master instructor with the RKC and StrongFirst and wrote books such as Kettlebell Muscle, Even More Kettlebell Muscle, Kettlebell Strong, The Giant. Has been around the world for a long time doing this. But he is one of the true OG humble geniuses of strength programming in our world. And I got a chance to sit down with him and chat about all things strength. We chatted a little bit of complexes, of his co-founding and original strength, as well as what he's doing now. And we talked deep into the side of mental strength as well as just physical strength and how we can work to just be stronger in all different areas of our lives. So Geoff is always a absolute gem to sit down and chat with. He is so knowledgeable, such just a great guy to dive into a million different topics with. I know you guys are going to love this and you're going to get a lot out of it. All right, we'll get right to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to catch you on the inside.
Here we are. Geoff, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Mike.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for doing this.
It's been about, I don't know, what, a year, 18 months, something like that?
It's about like a year or so last time we chatted, which I was just telling you off air. I think the last time that we spoke, I was fresh. It was fresh off or right at the end of the Wolf program. So I was half praising you for the strength I built and half cursing your name half the time through that program. It is absolutely
that sounds about right. That's the feedback I get from that.
Well, it is. It's such a great program. It was such a great program. I remember I was working with Huggy at the time and just in a kind of hypertrophy based program. And I'm like, why is it called the Wolf? And he's like, legs feed the wolf, man.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Yeah, it's a good program. I just got an email the other day. A guy said, hey, I got the your book and I wanted something that was brutal. And so that looked like the most brutal thing. And I got to drop the weights. Is it okay to drop the weights or should I just do something else? You're like, it's just it's just so in your face, like the sheer brutality of it, I mean,
is that the most like common thing that comes out? Cause I thought the same thing. I'm like, I could probably do this with 24s. And
that's exactly what he said. He said, I could do day one and day two with the 24s. I did the strong program with the 32s and it was awesome. But you put that throbbing heart rate in the oxygen debt in there, and the lactic acid accumulation. And suddenly you're looking at a pair of 16s for day three, which is what he was looking at.
Oh yeah.
They're awful, man. It's awful.
Well, I think because the first day of the Wolf was, I think, the medium day, which has two, you kind of bookend the squats in that one, I believe.
Yep.
And after doing that second set of squats, and I knew what the hard day was going to be. I'm like, there's 3 rounds in here. I'm like, there's no way I'm getting there. So I dropped down to 16s. I didn't even go to the 20s. I dropped it right down. And sure enough, I mean, it still works. It still works from there. It's still amazing to me, the complexes. I think I talked to you last time about this, of how in like an hour a week, like of time, like a few days a week, the results that you can get, from it. And I've heard this time and time again. Honestly, there's probably not a couple weeks have gone by since I've chatted with a guy who's been going through the Giant over there, which is the clean and best program in there. Yeah. So it's something about complexes that you hit on, man. I know that is just, especially I think for guys, it's just such the quick mass builder.
Yeah, it's a good mass builder. It's the time efficiency, it scratches the itch of the inner meathead, I think, like if you've ever been a meathead, like I was, probably still am, right? I mean, it gets that pump, gets the blood flow, makes you feel like you got a good workout. Nobody wants to feel like they got a bad workout, right? So complexes and the Giant, I think helps guys do that, right? And it allows them to live their lives too, right? I mean, you don't have to spend 2 hours a day in the gym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you see that? I mean, I know you've done a lot of work with both Kettlebell Muscle, Kettlebell, Strong and stuff. I mean, which is a lot of double bells and stuff like that. Did you always kind of look at it on the side of how can I get the absolute most efficiency in my time from every training that I work with?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the driving force behind pretty much all my programming. So my programming is not my programming generally is for the over 35, you know, you can slide it down to over 30, but over 35 busy individual, man or woman, who's got a life and doesn't want to sacrifice it, right? By going to the gym. By the time you go to the gym, if you're on a regular program, right, you 15 minutes to get there, 5 minutes to change, 10 minutes to warm up, 30 minutes to go through that, repeat the process. I mean, 90 minutes down the drain right there. If you got a bell or a pair of bells at home, bam, you're in and out in 30 minutes, depending on the program. You just saved yourself 60 minutes, right? One day, 3 hours a week. I mean, you can put that towards your family or your business or your friends or another hobby, you know? So it's always been on the forefront of my mind.
Yeah. The first time I went through, I believe, Kettlebell Muscle, it's the first book that I remember I got, you know, from you, and phenomenal program, you know, working with, but I just came off Viking Warrior conditioning. I remember it was Kenneth Jay's program, which was just like long bouts of snatching just over and over again of power. So I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like what, 10-minute workout? Like this is going to be glorious of going in. Right. Not realizing that, yes, snatching versus double bell work for strength, it is such a huge just shock to the system from there. Yeah. But I remember I was in my late 20s from there, and I put on 5 pounds in 4 weeks, and I'm not an easy guy to gain mass. I've just never been like that. And all of a sudden it just shot right up. So it is. There's something about always throwing in complexes that I think everybody should just dabble with at least a little bit in their time, especially like you said, over 30.
You know, you alluded to, you know, the pre-show about Tim Anderson, and he and a couple other guys, Doug Nepodal, who's a retired master instructor from StrongFirst. Those are two. I can't remember who the third one was. Might've been Dave Whitley. I can't remember, but they were my 2 guinea pigs for Kettlebell Muscle. And the reason I didn't guinea pig is I was broken, man. I was shattered. Like I was still dealing with fallout from my hips. I couldn't seem to get any traction. Anytime I'd go heavy, I'd break something, it seemed like. But those 2 guys literally put on a pound a week for 18 weeks. I think Tim stopped after 15 weeks, but Doug Nepodal, there was a third phase to that program that I cut out later. But they each put on in 12 weeks, 12 pounds of muscle, right? The very first workout, I think is 7 minutes long. Like, what, you know, is that going to be enough? Go do the program and then get back to me, right?
It is. I mean, we're talking, if you have no idea about like just the reality of doing it, it's like, it's a 7-minute workout. There's 6-minute abs out there and all this other stuff that you can do. It's like, we're built for trying to get this efficiency, but actually going through, it's like, no, you are going to be very happy that it's not 8 minutes afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
Of getting in. So
yeah, that's the heavy day, right? That's like 12 minutes on the Kettlebell Muscle, or 13 minutes, something like that on the heavy day.
Yeah. Well, because you drop that rest time down, right? It's like first you get like that nice 90-second rest going in. You're like, oh, this is beautiful. Then all of a sudden it drops to the minute rest, and you're like, oh shit, here we go again.
Like, what did I just do to myself?
Yeah.
Did I really sign up for this? You know?
Yeah. Were you shocked with those results when you got them from the guys?
No, because that was the whole intent of the book. So the whole intent of the program at that time. So that was, I wrote that in 2009, released in 2010. At that time, the entire world was talking about complexes for fat loss, right? And I had used them when I was coaching and with myself in Olympic lifting for, I think Coach Uvoric, who was often credited as the creator of complexes. I don't know whether he was or not. I mean, the Soviet, if you look in Medvedev's book, you'll see what looked to be like complexes, which are just exercises stuck together. But regardless, we use them in weightlifting, right? And I used them myself, and I used them with my athletes. And so they built, Coach Uvoric called it like a harmonious response within the body, something like that. But it produced great conditioning, and just, I was shocked at how much muscle you put on in the right places if there was caloric surplus, right? But like I said, at that time, everybody was talking about complexes for fat loss, and they're using, a bar. So you use a bar, or what in the kettlebell world, the equivalent would be like, a guy my size using a pair of 12s or something like that. And it's like, this is ridiculous. You're literally missing half or 3/4 of what a good complex is for. And the reality is if you're caloric neutral, you'll strip off body fat and put muscle on without having to go in a caloric deficit, right? Doing complexes. And so that's what I set out to prove by doing Kettlebell Muscle. And so the way those particular programs are designed inside Kettlebell Muscle is based on what I did with my wrestlers specifically when I was at Rutgers, and then some of the weightlifting programs that my coach did with me to pack on mass, and they were just kind of condensed.
Gotcha. So you're doing just the bar. So just the 45-pound bar. Were you adding more weight on it, or was it a pretty light?
I wasn't. That was at the time. That's what.
Gotcha.
What
okay.
People were talking about. They're like, oh, you just use the bar. Now Coach Uvoric, he trained weightlifters, and because he was a weightlifting coach, and he had a U.S. weightlifter, a very famous U.S. weightlifter, Wesley Barnett, use Uvoric complex number 1 with 80 kilos, so 176 pounds, and that's 5 exercises for 6 reps nonstop with 80 kilos, 176 pounds. And this guy was a 240 pound lifter, right? So it's really, really hard work.
Yeah.
So when I did a lot of complexes in my late 20s and early 30s, it was all with heavier weights, lower reps, right? So 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, those types of things.
Right.
And so that's what I was trying to mimic with the kettlebells and the programming inside Kettlebell Muscle. And I postulated it worked better because you had greater ranges of motion, which produced greater time under tension. And because of the offset weight of the kettlebell handles, you put the limbs in positions which recruit more muscles, which then again, more time under tension. So the whole postulate was, what if we took this concept of building muscle, right, with complexes, on a barbell, and we translated it over to a pair of kettlebells, not a single kettlebell, but a pair of kettlebells, because that's where the systemic overload comes from. And it worked great. Anybody who follows the program and actually eats and isn't afraid of eating will grow muscle on it.
Yes. Yeah. That's the point too. Got to eat. Back to those calories. Yeah.
Like,
what is it?
A lot of people get scared. They go, I don't know if I should eat this much since I'm only working out, less than an hour a week. Trust me, like the overload on your central nervous system is so powerful, right? You can put on muscle and it feels like you're cheating because you're not working out 6 days a week, an hour at a time, like we did when we were kids and we were following Joe Weider's programming or Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, right? Right. Minus the Deca-Drablin. I didn't say that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a call with a client earlier today who we just switched him over into more of some complex based work. And the first thing he says is like, I just felt hungrier this week. Like I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, dude, absolutely no. It's that power development. And I remember when, getting into it, it's still like, even as a coach, I'm like, okay, I can understand the concept of this, but still like 7 minutes to 10 minute workout. Like what's going on here? And then when you go through it, you're like, oh, time under tension. You're not letting those bells go the whole time from there. It's like, so by the time you get to that last round of squats, it's like everything in your body is turned on at that time. Yeah. You cannot.
Your intercostal muscles, they hurt. Your ribs ache, your diaphragm's about to spasm, right? It's great.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it is great. Yes. So, well, complex. It's always fun talking complexes with you. Yeah. It is. And I know so many people get so much out of it, and it's exciting. One thing I did want to talk to you about is, as we mentioned, I just got a chance to chat with Tim Anderson. It's the first time I got to talk to him about his becoming bulletproof and kind of how he got into the work with Original Strength, and he mentioned the work that, you and Mike McNiff were doing with him, kind of doing a set, then trying some stuff out, then going back and doing it again, and kind of the guinea pigging of this program from here. What was your experience of getting in with Original Strength? Was it something that Tim just kind of brought up to you? It was like, here, let's try this out and see if it works. Or did you kind of see some of this stuff a little bit earlier?
Yeah, so Huggy and my wife and Tim and I were all involved in another performance system, and it was super complex. And Tim came over to my studio. This is probably January, February, March of 2010, I think. And all 4 of us were kind of sliding out the door of that system because it was just, the guy who was running it wanted more money for more secrets. And, like, dude, what we're doing is too complex and we can't figure this out and it's not working. And the guy, Tim, was having problems with his hamstring muscle, right? His hamstring was constantly pulling. And the dude who was running the program, the guy, the guru, said, oh, well, see, Tim, that's because your sunglasses, the shaft of your sunglasses is pressing on your seat or your sphenoid. And then I can't remember that. That's compressing your trigeminal nerve, something. And that's shutting down your hamstring. And see the look on your face. It's like, and I looked at Tim and I said, Tim, that is, and then a long string of expletives came out of my mouth. And I just said, I refuse to believe that God made us that fragile. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I don't know how deep Tim got into the origin story of that, but I guess it was in April or May or both. Tim and Huggy and my wife and I went to Tim's place and we just started putting this stuff together. And so that was 2010. And so the four of us worked on it. We went our separate ways. My wife was working as a physical therapist at the time. So she worked on this stuff with her clients or her patients, excuse me. I worked on it with my clients. Tim worked on it with his clients. Huggy worked on it with his clients. Then my wife got pregnant and we had our son in 11, I think, in 2011. And so she dropped out. And so it was just Tim and Huggy and myself. And then something happened with Huggy at the time, and I don't remember. But long story short, 2012, Tim and I rebranded Becoming Bulletproof, which is what it was called at the time. We did a seminar, I think, in April of 2012 in Alexandria, Virginia. And then we rebranded it to Original Strength later that year or early in 13. And then we just kind of took it on the road, man. It was fantastic.
Was this a time when you were going through, I know you mentioned a lot of hip stuff, and I know you were were rebuilding a broken body as well. And that's what Tim talked about. He had so much overload in his body that, but he refused to just take a break. And he even said that he's like, I probably could have just taken a break and I would have been fine from there. But from there, he kind of found this whole new program. Was that what you found too? Was like,
So we have been testing the 5 resets, right? And just playing with the 5 resets in basically 2010. So from April 2010 to September 2010, I was just playing with the big 5. And I don't even think it was 5 at that point. I could be wrong. This is over a decade ago. And I thought, this stuff is great. This is awesome. Wow, I can lift again. And so I started lifting again and it sure seemed to be working. And then I went to, I taught at an RKC, September 2010. And then the next weekend I went back up for the Dan John Pavel Easy Strength workshop. And I jacked up my back, reaching for the map to get directions to go up to see my weightlifting coach. I flew into Philly airport and was driving up to North Jersey. And long story short, I had this radiating pain across my left hip, down my leg. And even though I'd been doing like this super performance program, which should have provided, I did four full years of that, which should have provided a strong foundation to be able to do Becoming Bulletproof. Right. And my wife was 3 months pregnant and I'm lying on the floor of this gym in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. And I've got to go demonstrate the squat for Marty Gallagher in front of Pavel, Dan John, and all the senior and master instructors. I can barely move. And I went, this is just freaking ridiculous, man. Nobody cares if you got a gold medal, a silver medal, or any sort of medal at all. Nobody cares how much you clean and jerk, right? At the end of the day, nobody's going to remember that. But your son's going to remember if you were around to play with him or if you were injured on the sidelines. And I made a decision at that point in time. I'm like, I'm done. Done all this Olympic lifting nonsense. I don't care. Whatever I was doing, I'm going to do the opposite and I'm going to get myself functioning again. And so September 2010, I got home from that conference on a Monday night, limped around. Tuesday, I went out. I didn't have any clients and I went out into the backyard. We lived in a townhome at the time. So it was a great big green open space. And I crawled 100 yards every hour on the hour for 8 hours. And by the end of the day, my back was fine. And from that point on until about April 2012, all I did was Becoming Bulletproof, Original Strength, the resets, whatever you want, and bodyweight anterior chain work. And interestingly enough, every time I tried to touch a bar, right, I'd do some deadlifts it was primarily deadlifts, my body would basically rebel on me and things would start to shut down. So it was all calisthenic based, anterior chain work, like dips, pull-ups, L-sit, tuck-sit versions, right? L-sits, tuck-sits, and then crawling, dragging a sled or chain, 100 pounds, 200 pounds. And I did that up until April 2012. And then I released kettlebell. Just before I released Kettlebell Burn Extreme, I said, you know what? I'm not going to do what I did with Kettlebell Burn or Kettlebell Muscle. I'm actually going to do this on myself. And this will be a great test to see just how well becoming bulletproof worked and whether or not it made me bulletproof. And so I would do 100 yards of body weight crawling and then go do my extreme workouts 6 days a week and then cool down with 100 yards of body weight crawling. And it was great, man. It was fantastic. It did exactly what it said it could do. And then in 2013, I went back in and did some weightlifting and competed in October 15 and February 16 in some weightlifting meets based on, doing OS.
That is so crazy. So every hour, 100 yards crawling, did that for 8 hours. And then just like that, that's fucking incredible. That's insane.
It is insane, man. I mean, but it's like if you got a goal, right? And so my other goal was to just use it to get back in Olympic lifting. And so I was in school. We moved out to Colorado in 13 to go to school. And then we had my daughter in December of 13, which was awesome. And so I'd get up at 5 a.m. and then I'd take my chains up to the park, which is right up the street. And I would crawl either with 100 pounds or 200 pounds, somewhere between 100 and 400 yards. And then I would go back home and eat breakfast and then go to school and then come home from school and work and then go out on my platform and do Olympic lifts, heavy Olympic lifts. And so I was training pretty much like a pro athlete, 2 to 2.5 hours a day, which is hilarious, right? Because we just talked about time efficiency complexes, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was not to be time efficient. But the point so I was training 6 days a week, 2.5 hours a day.
Wow. Yeah.
So
when you went and you did that crawling, was that because, you knew already what the crawling benefits were from the work that you did with Tim, but was it also just because you couldn't do anything else with your back? So it was almost like, this is all I can do right now? Or was it, you're just like, I know this is going to fix my back when I do this?
Well, we had been researching it, right? So we postulated a system, right, that we put together why it worked, right? So it was based on diaphragmatic breathing, head control, and vestibular stimulation / activation. I'm not sure those were the 3 tenets of original strength when I was, with the program, when I was part of the company.
Yeah. Why does it work so well? I know kind of the components of it. I understand the proprioception that you get from it, but why is it so effective of crawling?
The crawling is not so effective. All right. It's so effective for 80% of the people, 80% of the time.
Gotcha.
Which is why we took original. So that's kind of the backstory of becoming bulletproof OS. Is originally we had the original resets, and we noticed that they worked for 80% of the people, 80% of the time. So there's still this group of people out there it doesn't work for. So that's where we came up with the regressions. And if you go to, so we put the company together, Original Strength, in 2012, 2013, something like that. And I left the company, I think, 16, 17, 18, something like that. I stopped teaching on the road I kind of took a sabbatical because of my family, probably 15.
Okay.
So I really don't know what's been taught since 15. So I can just give you, what
principles of it
started with. Right. So we came up with these regressions, and that became the foundations workshops. Right. And we had the level 1 and then a level 2 and then a OS performance workshop. So I think we had OS performance. I know we wrote the book. So I think actually we did OS performance stuff on in the level 2 workshop. So the reason it works so well is most of the time is because it's based on a human developmental or neurodevelopmental sequence, which is how you gained your movement in the first place. So it's just based on going back and revisiting that sequence.
Okay.
And
yeah, that was one of the things that Tim said when we talked, which I thought was so interesting. Where I mean, he kept going back to reverting to how babies learn how to move. We first learn with our head. It's the head nods, and the shoulders, and everything. But one of the things he said, which I thought was so interesting, was that we already have all the strength that we ever need in our body to live a joyful life and to enjoy it. It's like we just need to unlock it, take the brakes off of our strength, and it seems like that's one of the big things of OS work, is taking the brakes off the things that we just, hinder and just kind of, lock up, and we just can't access it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of the program. I mean, there's, I think sports scientists postulated you can, for the most part, the average person can only ever access 30% of their absolute strength. Right. And then an elite strength or power athlete, like a power lifter, or a Olympic weightlifter, can access higher levels, 40, maybe even 50% of that strength. But I would argue that 30% is high. And the whole point of OS and taking the brakes off is we have these things. You and I are sitting here, right? And sitting is actually incredibly harmful for the body the way we do it. So we actually degrade our posture, and that changes our movement mechanics. And so OS, right, basically rejuvenates the body, resets, to use the OS terminology, resets, and it resets your posture and resets the function of your body's systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it does that through revisiting pieces of the developmental sequence.
Gotcha. Do you still practice it a lot yourself in your own training?
How do I answer that? Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
So I built my own system because it's tough to talk about this, I guess, maybe on camera, because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. But for me personally,
do you still jump into resets every once in a while if you need to, or is it just like?
Yeah, but I don't necessarily call them that. I've just created like a much more systematized, for me, type approach, right? So I crawled I described that, what I was doing with the crawling. Mm-hmm. I did that for 7 years. And then I thought, you know what? There was one issue I had a problem with, and that was my lunge position. Like, I still could not lunge without my pelvis doing funny things, right?
Gotcha.
So, and my right hip would just get tight, and my right knee would get tight. Never hurt, right? All the knee pain I had, like 25 years of knee pain, and it was gone. Mm-hmm. Never hurt, just felt stiff. Or you ever get like pressure in a joint, it feels full?
Yes.
Right. You ever that? So that's kind of how they would feel. So I just went back to the drawing board, mm-hmm. and put together a different system, kind of flip the OS lens around. So I still use the concept of the neurodevelopmental sequence. I just use it differently than I used it in OS.
Gotcha. So. Okay. And now mostly, who you're working with mostly now is, you said, mostly like men and women over 30, over 35. And so there's some wear and tear on the body, from there. So, doing this, is there, it's funny because when we get, I'm that person, I'm that demographic, late 30s, I love training, but still in my head, I'm still the 18-year-old athlete that was running out there, and you're
not alone. Yeah.
It's still in our head. It's like, okay, it's like, you can go out, you can train, and you can eat some shit, go out, grab a beer, smell a cup of coffee the next morning, and then you're just ready to go. It's like, no, things change, things
That's
definitely
exactly right.
But still, it's fun to train hard at the same time. But I know, like now, like just, with my body, what you just described there with your knee, with the knee, I just had that where it just felt like full. There's no issue. There's no like injury or anything there, but it's just a little bit different. So little TLC around the ankle joint, around the hip joint, that all of a sudden it just opens up. But it just changes over time. It's like our mind doesn't change, but the body definitely, changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, which was something we talked about a little bit off camera, was the mental side of strength. We talked a lot about the physical side, and it's always good to do that. But there seems to be this misconception that goes on about like the gym is my therapy. I've heard this a bunch of times before. And I think, especially with athletes, it can almost be a dangerous path of thinking that way. I think for a long time, I was like, yes, physiology drives psychology. But at the same time, it's like, if you are dealing with internal, mindset and battles from there, you need to have your own mental strength practices as well. When you were at Rutgers and when you worked with young athletes, did you see like a lot of that at all? Or was it like, did you see like it was, building mental toughness did really work when they were in the weight room?
Yeah, we did use mental toughness training through physical means, it's very similar to how the military does it, right? But it was always a means to an end, right? So an athlete uses the weight room to prepare himself for what he faces on the field or the mat or, the crew team. I was in charge of men's, lightweight crew, heavyweight crew as well, but mostly lightweight. We had some good times for a couple of years with those guys.
Yeah.
Talk about mental toughness training. So yes, it can be an avenue or an approach, but it's not the only avenue or approach, right? So mental toughness really, this sounds stupid, and it sounds like a no duh thing, but it really starts in your mind. Like you have to decide to be mentally tough. And in order to be mentally tough, you have to know why you're going to be mentally tough, right? So I have no problem with someone going to the gym and using the gym for the therapy. If it makes you a better dad, better mom, better boss, better employee, God bless you, right? If that's what you need. But I think it's only like, if you're talking about athletes, it's half the picture or a quarter of the picture or an eighth of a picture, right? When I was training to compete, like I had a vision, right? And the vision is what drove me. And there was a why behind the vision. Right. And so the why drives the vision, and the vision drives your ability to persevere. And that's the mental toughness. That's the thing that keeps you going. And if you don't have that, well, then it's impossible to be mentally tough. You'll quit. Right.
Did you do any specific practices at all for that vision? Like, obviously it's the goal, like this is what I do. I'm going to be on the platform and stuff, but was there things that you did to remind yourself or to, bring that up at different stages during training to know, okay, this is where I'm at? Because I know like training for an event and stuff, like there's peaks and valleys in there. Some days you feel like freaking, champ in there. Other times it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like my first day of lifting. It could be very easily to go down, a deep track from there. What did you do to kind of keep that mental focus?
Well, again, it's all about the picture that you have in your head, right? So mine started with, I was fortunate to get exposed to this relatively early. I broke my arm wrestling in high school, like 6 days before our championship. So that's heartbreaking, right? And so then I spent the entire next year rehabbing from that. And so my drive was to win the championships the following year, right? And so that was the picture that I had in my head. Because that was the picture I had in my head. I did a needs assessment or a needs analysis. What do I need to do? Who do I need to become in order to achieve that goal? Right. And so I just did what is it called? Backwards planning or reverse engineering, figured out where I want to go and then how I would get there. Right. So that's how I got bitten by the lifting bug. Right. And so again, the key point is just to keep the picture in the front of your mind. And if you don't have a very, very clear picture of why you're doing what you're doing, you're just going to fall flat. Right? Yeah. The picture is what drives you. So another good example, there was a guy named Jude. He was the heavyweight at Rutgers on the wrestling team. And then he wanted to go play football. So he went and played football and he injured his shoulder, had to get shoulder surgery. And then he had to take a year off. And in the meantime, the starting center for the football team became the heavyweight. So JJ and I worked together I guess it was his 5th year, right? And his vision was to go to nationals. And so that was in his mind. And so we would do crazy things. We had this thing called the plate carry, right? Had basically nothing to do with the weight room. It was just SPP work to build his will and his drive and his determination, right? And it was, you have 2 100-pound plates. They are one's at the top of the hill, one's at the bottom of the hill. They're twins, lovers, whatever you want to call them. They don't like to be separated. They have to be together at all times, right? So he would just run up and down the hill carrying, place 100-pound plate on one side, he always had a 100-pound plate in his hand.
Wow.
And the guy, he was awesome, dude, man. He won the Lehigh Invitational, which was one of the big invitationals, mid-year invitationals.
Mm-hmm.
And then he blew his ACL. Actually, he didn't blow his ACL. He knocked out the starter, who was the guy on the football team who got pissed. And, we believe that guy took out his knee. Right. So,
oh gosh. Oh.
Yeah, we were pretty pissed about that because he worked so hard.
Yeah.
But again, it was the picture in his mind that drove him. So if you have a really clear picture of what you're doing and you can keep that in front of you, right, then that will get you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and have you drag 200 pounds of chain across a frozen field.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so when I train, and it's interesting to contrast this because I took a little bit of time off from the fitness industry for a couple of years and I had no picture in my head. And so it's like, I just turned all the knobs down, put everything on the back burner, went into maintenance mode. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it was hard to dial that back up again because I need to get a new picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. I would assume that that's like a lot of people, especially when you get to the ages of 30, 40 and so, where, maybe you were an athlete before, maybe you got into it, but then a little hiatus comes or so like that. It's that time you focus on your family, focus on your career, your priorities change during that time. And right. just to easily flip that light switch on again is not a simple thing, to do. It's like, there's going to be a lot of foggy days there where you might only know one step forward in order to, make progress on that day from there.
Yeah.
So did you do anything different, or like, was there any different kind of, practice that you did of kind of getting that light switch back after taking that time off?
Well, it just comes back to having a really compelling reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think at one point, man, it's like 2018. I think once that summer I got down to, I was a lightweight, man. I got down to 188 pounds just from not training. I mean, I walked around at 210 pounds, 205 pounds. So,
mm-hmm.
But it again comes back to that why. That why has got to be crystal clear. And most people won't take the time. And I know that sounds harsh. Like, you're judging people for saying most people won't. Well, dude, look, 70% of America is overweight, right? Mm-hmm. The delineation between overweight and obese has now tipped. More people are obese than overweight in that 70% category.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very fair thing to say. Most people won't take the time to find their why. Mm-hmm. And the why usually is fleeing from pain towards pleasure. Right.
Yes.
And so for me, as my kids get older, I've got to maintain my strength because my son does BJJ and now he just walks by me and he'll like punch me and like jump on me. And,
all of a sudden you're in an arm bar on the ground.
If I'm not my whole self, right? Like he's going to hurt me, So if I let myself just, shrink up, mm-hmm. I'm going to wake up with something broken one day,
Yeah.
So, because he's a tough kid. I mean, he's super tough. I mean,
mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that because he's my son and I'm bragging. I mean, he's just a tough kid. He's built like a brick outhouse, right?
Yeah.
And so my why is my kids. I want to be able to, I want my son to be able to like 16, 17, 18 and be able to roll with me on the mat
mm-hmm.
and not hurt me, right? And not only not hurt me, but know that his old man is still the boss. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
his old man is not an old man. He may have some gray hair,
mm-hmm.
but he's young on the inside. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's
so. Those are my whys, and those things are what drives me. Those things are what get me to train, right? Those things are what get me to lift heavier, to do more reps, to go drag some chain,
mm-hmm.
or a sled, like Louis Slimmons. Dragging the sled or do some complexes or whatever. Right. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. The why concept is so interesting because it's something that is, we know what that means. You hear it all the time and stuff, but, I talked with Dr. Lisa Lewis about this recently. She's got a great program called Psych Skills for Fit Pros, where she teaches, young trainers about the psychological side of it, of, people. And she said, she's like, 4 out of 5 people who even sign up for personal training, like they actually sign up, they put their money down, they're still not mentally ready, to go after it. It's like we can just get so desperate that we want to change something, that we're willing to put something down just so we're okay. Now we have a plan, we're doing something. But the why factor is interesting. I think we don't really get taught, especially at a young age, how to set a goal. We hear you have to have a goal. A goal is important, but it's like, okay, what the hell does that actually mean? And by just saying there, it's like you might have a why, and so many people would say, yes, it's my kids. Okay, why is it your kids? Go that extra level. Who is it? I think the guy from, it was Toyota, the guy who started Toyota Industries, the 5 why method, where it's like if you ask 5 whys, you'll get to the root cause of any problem in there. And actually just like taking that maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes and actually asking why the goal is your goal. I think that I think we're maybe shifting that direction a little bit more for the culture of going into it, of actually knowing why is the goal. It's like, because it's not just it seems like such a simple concept, but actually when you attach it to that emotion of like, you saying like, okay, if your son all of a sudden, like you try with all your might to, get out of a hole from him and he's got you down, what that feeling is going to feel like. And you don't want that feeling. It's it's going to be something that's going to drive you.
Yeah. That's not some people would say, well, that's just part of getting older. Well, it's not part of getting older. It doesn't have to be. Right. Jacqueline Lane was 97 years old and he died from pneumonia, which is what most people who are in their late 90s die from. But he was doing fingertip outstretched push-ups, right? Like plank push-ups with your arms overhead, right? At 97. And you can say, yeah, but he was doing that in his 30s. But the point is he maintained it into his late 90s.
Yes.
Right. At 70 or 75, he swam, what was it? The Long Beach Harbor, right? In front of, like past the Queen Mary, which was sunk there in the harbor. I don't know if it's still there, with 70 rowboats behind him. And he was shackled. And there were 70 people in the 70 rowboats. Right. So you set your own limitations. I set my own limitations, right? You're bound by them. They become your own shackles, to use, referring back to Jacqueline Lane. And, all buying decisions are made on emotion and they're reinforced with logic and reason. So what you just said, digging down those layers and finding what's underneath, like the 5 whys, is super important, right? And that's pretty much what I did. The problem is most people are more interested in what's on TV or, Facebook or whatever, TikTok or whatever the latest social app is. And they won't take 20 minutes to do that. Yeah. Right. And that's amazing. Because we've got now like a 15-second attention span based on this thing, right? We're used to pressing a button and getting a response. Right. And so if you do a workout, right? If I do a workout that you give me and I don't wake up and I'm 20 pounds lighter, I didn't get this response, right? So I'm going to quit. Too hard, right?
I know it's interesting because like I don't know, maybe because I'm in this world all the time and I talk to people like you and I talk to coaches. So I feel like this is more of the norm when I know there's so many issues that are going on, especially in this world. It's something that we don't even talk about anymore is the overweight and the obesity epidemic that's going on in the country. And we're seeing it just from everything that we've just gone through in the last 2 years with the pandemic. One of the biggest issues of having serious side effects from COVID is being overweight and being unhealthy from there. They finally are coming out and they're saying it from there. Like we've known it all along, but now it's like, just getting yourself in better shape and just work. It is the number one life-saving thing that we can do as a culture.
Right. Yeah. And I don't understand. I mean, God, it's hard for me to say this. I don't understand why it's so hard because when I was young, I determined never to be that person. Right. And I understand that the 70% aren't me, right? Like I'm in the minority, right? So, but there's so many good things that come out of just recapturing your health, right? Just losing 10 pounds, getting rid of 10 pounds of fat, which is so easy to do. Just stop eating. Yeah. Right. People are like, that's easy for you to say. It is easy for me to say because I do it all the time. Right. Like practiced fasting for 12 years on and off, right? literal intermittent fasting, right? Whether it's a daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly approach, it's not that hard to do.
Yeah. It's actually very mentally clearing. Yeah, it is. It's an incredible practice. I wonder too, because it's like, trying to solve the fitness industry here, in our time together, but it's the message almost like going into something like Kettlebell Muscle or, there's a skill involved in that. It's kind of like learning a sport to really get effective there. I mean, if you just go through it and you do it, you're going to get results. But if you really hone in your skills, like your clean and press, really get that tight clean in there and actually learn a skill like you're learning a sport, now all of a sudden, like you feel some competence to it. And I think it's still, we don't talk about building strength or building nutritional habits or building meditation as something that's a skill that you can learn. It's like we put kids in basketball and we put them in hockey and we put them in all these sports and they're learning a skill. It's like, no, like learning how to ask why to a goal that you have can be a skill that you can change, but we don't think of it that way as much. And I think if the more messages that are out there of talking like, no, you can actually learn this skill. Because when you learn a new skill, it's like, with your son with BJJ, when he learns a new hold and how to escape it, like that's something like, wow, that's triggering a creative side of our brain that we don't, that, you get the cathartic release a little bit from the strength side of it. But now you're adding this creative side where it's like, oh, wow, like now I really felt the difference from that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, this is just a giant can of worms. It's not as little to do with the fitness industry. We're just seeing the symptoms, right? But a part of it is what's the when you're learning a new skill, there's unconscious or subconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, right? Conscious competence, and then unconscious competence, right?
Yes.
That's how we learn. But we live in a society where, especially now, man, the last 10 years has been, or maybe 15 years has been, we no longer teach critical thinking. You are taught what to think, right? Versus how to think, which means there's no room for you to fail. And if you fail, then you are a failure. And that completely negates that learning curve we just talked about, because everybody starts at unconscious incompetence, right? Any new skill, riding a bike, learning jujitsu, reading a book, right? Learning how to write when you're a little kid, it's all unconscious incompetence, and it's all on that scale. But now there's no room for failure. And so we've had it indoctrinated into our brain. Like if you have a piece of chocolate, you've broken your diet and you can't start over, so you may as well just, throw your hands up in the air and go lie in the middle of the street and get run over by a bus. I use that. That's the logical jump there is with when you have kids. I've always told our kids, look, if you fell off your bike in the middle of the street, what do? Do you lie there and go, I fell off my bike? Ah. No, you get up, you dust yourself off,
and you get out of the street,
do it again, right? But our society's not like that, right? This is how you think. This is what you think. If you don't measure up, you're a failure. It's not okay to fail. Failure is not part of the learning process. And we've negated the whole learning process of self-competence and self-mastery, right? So we have 70% of people walking around who are demonstrating zero self-mastery in a very, very important area of their life, which is their health. Right?
Yeah,
wow, that was a rant. Hope that was okay.
Oh, I think that was perfect. No, not at all. I think we'll amplify that one up. So when I was talking with Dr. Lisa, she mentioned that she used a word I love, which was leveraging motivation, where she said we had people coming in and, you get motivation from, it's either extrinsic, I want to drop 20 pounds because I want to look great this summer or so. It's like, or intrinsic, it's coming from within. Well, we've almost been taught too that like the extrinsic motivation of wanting to drop weight, that's not motivation enough. You're going to fail with that. If it's not coming from within, then it's not enough. So we tell people they're not motivated enough. And she's like, I had a person reach out to me out of nowhere and said, I'm not motivated enough to change. And she's like, dude, you reached out to me. Like that's motivation. Right. You're trying to find. Yeah, but it's like,
Yeah.
and I feel for the person that's going through that, because it's just, we get into this train of thought of like, if I don't feel every ounce of that why that it's just screaming through me, that I'm obviously not motivated enough and I'm just going to eventually fail. When it's like, no, if you just want to drop some weight, if you just want to do, like, get into it. And then all of a sudden, when you add a skill component to it where you feel competent of doing it. I used to say this all the time when I worked at a commercial gym. I worked at a place where we had memberships plus training, and you would see the people who were so scared to walk into the gym. They would actually shuffle like up to the front desk. Mm-hmm. And then my office was right there when everybody swiped in, and you would see people after they started to get some progress or they did something, they started to feel confident. You saw they walked into the gym differently than when they first did. It was a 100% body language there. And I would stop and I'd be like, hey, come on in. It's like, you're walking different. And they look at you like you have 3 heads. It's like, no, it's like you actually walk like you feel like you belong here. And it's like, so like, it's a short walk to get there of just learning that skill, but just take that leap and just build the skill. And then, I think we'll get there. Hopefully we're on the right track by just having these conversations. So.
What do they say? What is it? The competence breeds confidence, right?
Yes.
And then it becomes perpetual. Confidence breeds competence, and competence breeds confidence. And it's that negative feedback loop, right? It just gets better and better. It's like the flywheel effect, faster, better, more cemented, right? And that's that learning process too, right? Unconscious incompetence. Mm-hmm. Right. Breeds. And then you get a little toehold, little foothold that breeds some confidence, takes you to the next level. I don't know who said it, but I think it's very profound. The journey of 1,000 steps, of 1,000 miles, begins with 1 step.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a mountain. Yeah. I live in the mountains. Right. And so there's mountains off in the distance, and you can see the mountain from the distance, but you can't see the mountain until you're on the mountain, and it looks much different, right? And then you get to the top of the mountain. So I live Pikes Peak's right out my window here. And when you go up and stand on top of Pikes Peak, the world bends. You can see the curvature of the earth.
Wow.
Right. So
talk about a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. The perspective is different, right? So your 1,000 or 10,000 mile journey begins with 1 step, and every step you get closer, right, it comes into a bigger focus, better view. There are more details that you're aware of that you get to take in, right? It may look like a straight path, but you may have to switch back up the mountain like you do to get up Pikes Peak, right? If you're driving in a car. So not sure I was going with the Pikes Peak analogy, but it fits in there somewhere.
I like it. Yeah. I think it's
there somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Geoff, it's great talking to you, man. I really appreciate you.
Likewise,
this has been great. Absolutely. So we'll definitely do this again soon. It's always a blast talking with you. So, anybody wants to check out your stuff, Chasing Strength, that's the chasingstrength.com. That's the best spot.
Chasingstrength.com. Yeah. Head over there, poke around. If you have any questions, hit me up at email support@chasingstrength.com. So Give me about 24, 48 hours to get back to you, unless it's a weekend. So if you email me on a Friday night, I won't get back to you probably like Monday night. So I'm not blowing you off. Just the weekend, man. Got a family here.
Exactly. I love it. Geoff, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. Listeners, thank you so much. We'll check you on the next one.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like the show, please give it a 5-star review, give it a thumbs up, all that good stuff. And if you want to get the inside scoop on all new episodes coming up, behind the scenes insights, and free training resources, then you can join the Strength Connection private Facebook group now. Just go to Facebook groups, type in the Strength Connection, and join in. Also, don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.